So we want to thank you for being here today. And what
Thank
we're
you
going
for
to,
having me.
well, of course, of course. And those of you at home, just so you know, Diego just left another interview. So we have to show that one up. We have to show our roadie pride.
Yeah.
Uh, so, Diego, first of all, tell us a little bit about why you chose theater. What was the thing in your life that was the pivot that made you say, I want to do this?
Well, I was talking about the fact that when I was little, I had such an unbelievably overactive imagination.
Mhm.
Every single time I would go watch a film, I would come home and I swore that I was that character. So for example, one that stands out in my mind is Spider-Man. I went to go see Spider-Man. I came home and I swore that I was going to climb those walls. So I tried really, really hard. It never worked, but I really did try. I remember when I was younger, I wanted to be a first grade teacher. And then I went to first grade. I didn't want to be a first grade teacher anymore. I'm not gonna lie, I was not the biggest fan of my first grade teacher. So then I said, let's switch careers. So then I said, I want to be a vet. But I realized that nothing else made me as happy, as excited as playing pretend. Playing pretend was where it was at. So I think from very young, I was always pretending to be other characters or even be a tree, anything. And so I think that love for playing pretend started from very, very early on in life. And it wasn't until I got to senior year in high school when I finally decided, I said, yeah, this is it. This is
And
the
what were some of the stellar roles that you got to play as a child in your theatrical
Oh my goodness.
experience? Come on.
Okay, so one thing that I used to do a lot was I would take my dad's belt and I would
Uh-huh.
tuck it into the back of my pants, and that was my tail. So I would be a
Okay.
monkey. I would climb trees. I would sometimes be a tiger. I would take tube socks and tape them to the side of my head, and they would be my elephant ears. So I played a lot of animals. I was always a fan of animals. Spider-Man was one.
Mhm.
I was Harry Potter. In fact, when I was younger, I used glasses a lot. And there was a kid in school who said, Mom, look, that kid looks like Harry Potter. I was so flattered. And yeah, just, anything under the sun. I even played I watched I forget what version of Pinocchio it was, but it was some live action version of Pinocchio. And I played the fairy godmother. So anything and everything under the sun, I, it was me. I pretended to be it.
Right. And
Yeah.
and so when you were in school, were you also acting in a lot of plays as well that set you up for this, or was it sort of what was the moment? What was the moment that you were like, I'm in theater. I want to be a performer.
Yeah, high school for sure. High school is when I started performing. I didn't do much of it at all. I mean, we'll talk about this a little bit later as well, but me growing up as a Latino, it really isn't, it's not in our culture, at least in my family, it really isn't part of the culture to go watch theater the way I had friends that did growing up. So for me, my entry point was really the things that I saw on screen, either television or film. But when I got to high school and I actually started being able to participate in the productions, I said, this is magic. I mean, nothing compares to this. And I think the very first production that I did was a production of Oliver, and
Uh-huh.
I played one of the orphans, and my my solo line was cold jelly and custard. I remember it to this day, and I remember that on one of I think it was the Friday night performance, I lost my voice, so I couldn't even say my only line, and that was my first experience. And then from there,
Oh,
they just started just trusting me with more with meatier, more substantial roles. I played the leading player in Pippin. I played Bernardo in West Side Story, um, and things like that. And that was in high school. So
right.
yeah, I would say I think it was when I got to play the leading player in Pippin that I said this is the thing, because it
Right.
was so exciting, it was so different, and it was so interesting, and I knew nothing about it,
Right.
but still, it felt right.
And as a young person and as a Latino, what did
Mhm.
you how did you feel represented within the art that you were watching, whether it was on screen or if you were, I just wrote down West Side Story because I'm assuming that your entire high school was not Latino.
Yeah, yeah.
So, but what sort of representation, what sort of role models did you look to and aspire perhaps to be?
You know, um, oh man, we're really going into it
Yeah,
now.
let's go. Let's go right there.
I, high school was interesting. The first time I watched West Side Story was my sophomore year of high school, and I was taking a performing arts class. And I really, really credit that teacher for taking a look at who was sitting in her room and deciding, okay, we're going to watch a film that has some diversity in it. So she chose West Side Story. Now that I'm a little bit older, I'm a little, with West Side Story, just because it's still written entirely by white artists,
Mhm.
and so as much as they try to create the Latino experience, it still is very much um, through the eyes of white individuals.
Sure.
So it's not necessarily what it is. But when I watched it for the first time, that's the first time that I saw people with a darker skin tone and being portrayed as the other side, not necessarily good versus bad, but the other side. I mean, even growing up with Latin television, oof, it's really bad. It's really bad. Everyone, I mean, it's so unbearably stereotypical. Anyone who has
Yeah.
light skin, light colored eyes, and light hair they're always the protagonists. And then anyone with slightly darker skin is playing the maid, even in Latin television. So my community is not void of this kind of um, terrible these terrible ideas. So I watched West Side Story. I like seeing people speaking Spanish on screen. I had never seen it before, not in an American film. And I
Right.
said, wow, this is so cool. So I became, to a point, borderline obsessed with West Side Story. I
Sure.
knew all of the music, I knew all of the original choreography. And then we're, going through high school, and it's my senior year, and we're told that the final show of the season is going to be, the final show of my high school career was going to be Half a Sixpence. And everyone said, half a who? What is that? You know? And then I'm very lucky that one of the professors there was was a fan of mine, but also took a look into the department to see what they had at the time. And they said, you know what? Let's do West Side Story. It was very, very well intentioned, but I ended up being one of three Latinos, and everyone else was in brown face. And the people who ended up walking out on stage as the sharks all ended up darker than me. So I said, hold up, I'm actually born a fully born Latino into this country, kind of sort of the story of West Side Story, and I'm walking out with the lightest skin. What is happening right now?
Right.
Um, like I said, good intentions, very, very questionable execution. Um, but yeah, I really didn't see any representation. Not even in our own channel. Here at home we would watch Univision, and not even there. It was always white skinned individuals.
Right.
It wasn't until I discovered, my savior, Lin Manuel Miranda, that I saw people that look like me, that sound like me, that actually talk like me
Yeah.
on stage. I think that's the first time that I really saw it, and I said, "This." Um, I watched the tour of In the Heights, the first national tour, and at that point I said, "This doesn't even feel like theater. I mean, this is the music that I hear at my parties. These are the people that I see at my parties. These are, it was so foreign to me to see my people on stage doing this." And doing it so well.
Yeah.
It might sound, crazy, but that's really the experience that I had with it.
Right. And we'll get to In the Heights because
Yeah.
we have In the Heights stories and also experience. But it was
Yes.
interesting when you were talking about Univision. We used to watch Sábado Gigante quite
Yeah.
often. No, and it was one of the things. And I mean, I barely speak Spanish and I barely understand Spanish, but I found myself fascinated by the culture,
Yeah.
um, the cultural experiences that were in that and the messages that were often said. And I mean, again, it was broad humor, certainly, and I'm sure there's a lot that I missed, but I always found that very interesting that there was actually a skin dynamic and a hair coloring dynamic, that that seem to be perpetuated through. The other thing too that I always found very interesting is the women always had to be busty and thin, and all the men
Always
could be, you know,
Greek statues.
yeah,
Well, at least in the novelas themselves, the men were always these like they looked like Greek gods, and the women were always supermodels.
yeah,
Always. I mean, but that's another that's another thing. But in terms of the skin color, it was something that I didn't realize until I paid attention to it. But
yeah,
because I was growing up with that, and granted, I have quite light skin for a Latino, so it was a privilege that I had that I didn't realize I had growing up until I really started paying attention to it. And I said, wow, the Latino community really, really has some work to do as well.
sure.
Yeah.
Now, as much as we talk about West Side Story, and I could talk about West Side Story all day with you, Paul was probably like ready to punch me. 'Cause I certainly have my challenges with it too, and mine's based on a very, very awkward production that I did. But you have earned kind of your bread and butter, and you earned your equity card through that. Am I correct? Through West Side
You're
Story?
you're correct. Yeah, I
And
did.
so how have you seen West Side Story change over the course of time that you have been experiencing it from Theater by the Sea, and then you did it, where
I
was
did it at North Shore, and then I
North
did it
Shore?
at the Fifth Avenue in
Fifth Avenue,
Seattle.
right.
Yeah.
So I'm assuming that you had very different perspectives looking at the production based on who was maybe directing it or putting it together?
Yeah. Well, I've never gotten that question before, so thank you. I mean, the first time I did it was in high school, so that was a completely different experience. In terms of professionally, it was some of the same people involved. So the director from the production at North Shore was the choreographer in the production in Seattle. So
Oh,
I those were still connected. Um, you know, I think I think times are changing very slowly, but it's happening. So I'm excited to see that. For those two productions, it was really interesting because the entire creative team was white.
mm,
Not something that I was, I was used to that. So that was I was ready for that. But I remember when we were doing specifically the number America. It's one of my favorite numbers. It's so joyous. It's so filled with joy. But the director said, again, I think it's coming from a good place. It's well intentioned. He said, "Can you throw some sayings in there? Just like say some things in Spanish." Um, I think two or three of the Shark girls were not Latina, so they did what they thought they had to do and just started saying things. The one that really sticks out to me though is the rolling of the R. So literally they'll just be dancing, right, and then they'll just all of a sudden go. And I said, what is happening?
right.
Because I put it in context and I say, I've lived my life as a Latino in real life, and no one in their right mind would ever just all of a sudden just burst out with a rolling R,
Sure.
because what the heck? But again, that's what they were doing because that's what they have seen.
Mm,
So they were just following their instincts. And the directors didn't say anything about it because they didn't know either. It wasn't until some of the actors were expressing their being uncomfortable with the fact that just these random things were being thrown out, were that they then listened. But we had to have the courage to step out of our comfort zone and confront the directors and choreographers and say, hey, listen, this is I think we can make this a little bit better.
yeah.
That was kind of our approach to it. In Seattle, it was a little bit better because I think that the director turned choreographer remembered that situation, and
Mm,
so he talked to us. And the production in Seattle was cast much better. I think almost everyone was entirely of a Latino background.
oh,
Um,
nice.
so it was the casting was wonderful, and we were able to discuss, and we had a lot of people from different backgrounds. Granted, we weren't all Puerto Rican, but we had people from a bunch of different backgrounds where we were able to discuss, hey, what was your upbringing like? And we were actually able to connect. And I think part of the magic of West Side Story is the fact that I mean, my experience is always on the shark side, right?
Sure.
I got to see how how much of a family they are. Everything is about having each other's back, and it happens with the American side too. But they always have each other's backs. So in casting, all of us Latino, we were able to discuss our upbringing and, hey, what do you say for slang when it comes to this word? And we were able to create this familial connection that was shown on stage, and it made such an unbelievable difference in the experience.
Yeah, and we, we also see, because I think about the new production that was on Broadway for about 14 minutes before Broadway shut down. Sorry, I didn't mean to do that when you were drinking.
Yeah.
Spit take.
Yeah.
But the way that people approached it, and I know that had issues too, but I know that every production now is confronted with how do we incorporate the original intentions, right? But
Yeah.
make it truthful, make it honest. And again, I know that the other production had a lot of challenges with it, but I think that's how we're going to start to see West Side Story from now on, is being much more um, that the conversation will need to be had, not just like, okay, here's the Robbins choreography in 5, 6, 7, 8, and now you're going to do this thing.
Exactly.
But that does lead me also to In the Heights, which you get to do at Wheelock Family Theater, correct?
Yes.
And you
Yeah.
funny.
Yeah.
Yeah. How was that?
It was, I mean, I think now I've loved doing theater always, but I think that was the moment where my heart, like, I mean, I feel as though the only way I can explain it is my heart burst on
Yeah.
stage. I could not believe the experience I was having. And oh my goodness, if I cry, I'm fine, I promise.
It's okay.
It was just so unbelievably magical. You know, like I said, the first time I saw it was the first national tour. So I think it was 2009, 2010. And it was just so beautiful. But like I said, my first experience was weird because I said, is this theater? They're playing salsa music on stage. What the heck? Well, like, what's going on? You know? And then I go to URI and I get to I study theater and I get more into it, and I see, you know, and then I leave and I go and I audition because I saw this production, was auditioning it for Wheelock Family Theater, and I said, you know what, I'm gonna go. I went, and they cast me as Sunny. Now, I actually had gotten cast in the Asian tour of Legally Blonde, and they conflicted. So I said, oh no, what can I do? I emailed them in the Heights, and they said, you know what, we want you here, so just come when you're done with those rehearsals or whatever. I go, and first of all, I'm greeted with open arms. It's just really nice. And I mean, I was obsessed with the show, so I was ready to go into it. We're going through the whole process now. Granted, it was again a fully white creative team. The entire cast was BIPOC though. We had, you know, we had everyone under the sun. We had white people as well. We just wanted to make it a big mixing pot, you know, kind of what Washington Heights is actually like. So we it wasn't until we actually got into performances that I got to feel just the absolute unbelievable beauty of what we were doing. And I can remember specifically the performance. We were performing we were doing a school matinee, and it was inner city schools in Boston. So the audience was filled with BIPOC individuals, and they were young. I think it was middle school, high school was the age, completely filled BIPOC. We were performing Carnaval del Barrio, and there's this part where they talk about, they say alza la bandera, which means raise your flag. So in the choreo, I'm getting goosebumps just talking about it. In the choreography, we whip out flags, but what we did was we made, the director wanted us to take out our own flags rather. So we filled the stage with the flags of Puerto Rico and Mexico and Ecuador, Colombia, Guatemala, Nicaragua, Cuba, all of it. And the kids screamed and cheered for their flags. And I mean, when we talk about representation matters, I had a firsthand experience with it right there. I could not hold back the emotion. We were doing the show, right? But all of a sudden you hear all these kids cheering for their flags and seeing them on stage and listening to their music. And it was one of the most magical experiences I've had to date.
Right.
It's
Well,
just,
and I think just in that simple scenario, you've summed up the idea of representation in the best possible way, because going from West Side Story, where it is, and I almost said whitewashed, but this whitewash idea of what Latinos in 1950s, 1960s America are,
yeah,
often means played by white people, right? Or doing their Speedy Gonzales impersonation.
yeah, yeah,
To a situation in which the experience of the production is so um, felt that those students got to not just see, you know, Latinx people on stage, but saw their, even more so, even more myopic, their heritage and their world
yeah.
placed on stage. And the thing that was, I saw the original cast, the original production. I had like the best seat, and I won't lie to you when I say the minute that it started, there was an electricity with the production, right?
Yeah.
That did not stop. And I remember traveling in a very strange way that I've never experienced in the theater before. But there's, because the play itself, the musical itself, is a love letter to family, to culture, to even the home, whether it's where you have come from or where you have found yourself now. It felt represented, especially in Carnaval de Barrio, where where people were flinging out their flags out of their windows and everything, and you sort of assumed that everybody maybe was Dominican, because that's really what we focus on, in Usnavi and Sunny. But
Yeah.
then to see it kind of just open up, and you realize that this is a whole world, that this is that the people who are here are beyond just these ideas of what they are,
Right.
um, is exciting. And it plays into that idea of, representation isn't just, and again, as the white guy sitting in here in front of you, but it isn't just about what your skin looks like and what your perception
Mm.
is, or what that play is, but truly being able to see the stories that will help people connect. And I
Right.
think that's what theater does in so many different ways, partially because it's cheap in some ways compared to TV, which we'll get to as well. But you know, well, we'll talk about TV. So in Dash and Lily, your character was Puerto Rican, right?
Yeah.
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 So did you feel did you feel anything, like, in a sense, kind of other because you're not Puerto Rican? Was there sort of like, well, I gotta, or was it just went
I
with
mean, I guess there are, there are less, I guess the way I can put it is that there are fewer opportunities for Latinos in this, in this
Sure.
industry. But then when you go into the word Latino, what falls under that? And I guess in terms of opportunities, I would say that Puerto Rican maybe has a little bit more opportunities, at least from the numbers that I have seen. I mean, West Side Story is a full cast of, there's Puerto Rican, and then In the Heights as well has Puerto Rican, Dominican, and I've never seen my country represent, or my parents' countries represented, rather, Nicaragua and Guatemala.
Right.
Um, I guess I hadn't really thought about that.
No, I was just curious if because representation is taking, bigger steps every single day,
Mm,
then we start to micro, and this is a not in any challenge, but are we starting to sort of micro then down to, well, this is a Puerto Rican character, so this must be portrayed by you know, not just any actor of Latinx heritage, you know?
Right. Yeah. I don't know. I wonder. I mean, because
Wouldn't that be a lovely place to be?
I mean,
Actually,
yes. I
now
think
that I
that's,
think,
I honestly, that's where we should aim to be. I
yeah.
wonder when that'll get there. I'm not sure. I was just thinking though, when you were talking, I recently received a message from a fan of the show, and she's from Guatemala. And
Uh-huh.
again, if I when I tell you that my heart just bursts, she was just talking about the fact that she found out that I was Guatemalan, and she said that she could not she was saying that her feelings were undescribable to know that someone of her background is you know, for lack of, you know, for doing the thing, it was so beautiful to her and inspiring. And honestly, that's what feels the best, is to feel that people are being inspired. I think she was also mentioning that she wants to be an actress, so I said, this is so wonderful. And these are things that we miss out on when we don't have a, you know, a really mixed pot
Yeah.
of backgrounds and people.
Yeah.
Um,
And you made a difference. I mean, your presence changed somebody's life. That's so awesome.
yeah.
I mean, millions of people's lives, but um, so we'll talk about heavier topics as well. But I do want to sort of switch over now just a little bit because of the television. First of all, how does it feel to have fans? Is it weird?
It's very odd. It's very strange. I still, even you asking this question just feels very out of place. I was explaining this to, who was it? I don't remember who I was explaining it to, but I also spoke to Daraja. Shout out Daraja Hines. Um, I was talking to Daraja about this as well, and I was telling her, you know what? I think the strangest part about this entire process was the fact that when I was on set, it felt very much like high school. I was just with all of my friends, and we were putting on this show, and it just so happens that expensive cameras caught it.
Yeah.
And I really cannot explain it in any other way, because it just felt so personal to me, so close. And now to see it out and actually, you know, being distributed is such a strange feeling. I feel as though I can't separate myself from the thing. I don't really know how to articulate it.
Oh, that makes sense.
It feels like two very different things to me.
Right.
So people reaching out is still is very odd to me. Very new, very odd. Um, yeah.
So the experience of, you know, because you are primarily a theater person, you have trained in theater, most of your experience was in theater. Um, and getting this job, what things did you feel that you were super equipped for because of theater, and which things were you like, take a note, you know, and, and understand the medium in its differences, and how that sort of.
Honestly, I think it was mostly notes, but which
Okay.
was okay, because this was my I've done camera things before, but this is definitely the biggest budget project that I had done. So it was kind of a different animal that I had to take control of. First of all, my first day on set, I was so giddy. I was like, this is wild. This is crazy. And my first day was on a sound stage. So, I mean, when I was younger, when I was really, really small, sometimes I was more interested in the behind the scenes footage than I was in the film itself,
Sure.
because I wanted to see all of the magic, you know? And so when I got to walk into a sound stage and see everything happening at once, it was overwhelming. But then I had to remind myself, I said, all right, hold up. This is a job, breathe, get excited, but then let it go, and then just
Right.
focus on what you have to do.
Sure.
Um, what was the question? Oh wait, I remember. Yeah, but it was a lot of mental notes in terms of, I think what was most prevalent to me is, people say this all the time, but not until I experienced it did I understand it, was the idea of hurry up and wait.
Yeah.
It really was something that, it was such a different energy and such a different kind of momentum moving forward, that I was not perfect at by any means. So I'm still, of course, learning, but it was very much, you know, I would sit around. We would be in hair and makeup for a while. And then even after hair and makeup, we would sit around for an hour and a half, 2 hours, waiting for everything to be ready. And then we would do the scene and it was go, 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 go. Okay, again. And do it like this now. Okay, let's change that up. Done, cut. And then we would just sit around again for another 3. Sometimes, I mean, I think the longest I sat around for one day was maybe 8 hours, just waiting for the next scene to be set up and ready. So I think the hurry up and wait was where I really learned something new. And the reason it was new was because the way that I learned acting was for theater, and things progress in a linear way. So you prepare, you're going to be, if you're preparing your arc, you're in one place at the beginning of the play, and then you're somewhere else at the end of the play. And how do you get there? How do but in film, you have to, at least to me, and again, I'm just learning, so take this with a grain of salt, but I felt that I had to kind of map out what a performance would be, and then figure out in which headspace that character is in that specific scene. And then you have to do it over and over and over again. Once with a camera right here, once with a camera 20 feet away, once with a camera behind your shoulder. And so and you have to not necessarily give the same performance, but you have to experience what you were experiencing over again. So it was very, very new to me, but I'm ready to sink my teeth into something else. Hopefully, fingers crossed.
Yeah, well, of course. But we often complain about Tech Weekend, right? About how, oh, it's so difficult. But
I had no idea.
Yeah, exactly. That's it's like the worst Tech Weekend ever, and
it's every day.
Yeah, and then it's over. I mean, I think that's the thing that was always is, when you talking about it, is by the time you're ready to work, you're kind of exhausted because your anxiety is like, 8 hours waiting to do that thing. And then you have to do it 3 or 4 times and be committed and probably have to hit a lot of the same marks that you did that first time.
Exactly. That was the other thing. It was, I mean, we not only had to experience the life of the character in that scene, but if you did, we would do one take, and then if they liked that take, you would have to do things similar to it. I remember very clearly in one of the scenes, for example, the bedroom scene where we're helping Lily pick an outfit. There was a moment where yeah. I was wearing this giant blanket, and in one of the scenes it slipped off, so it came off of my shoulder, and so I didn't have the blanket anymore. So then the director comes up to me and says, okay, can we try to make sure that happens every time now? So I said, what? Not only do I have to play my actions and this and that, but now I have to make sure that this blanket slips off at the right time. It's a lot. But it's, I think one thing, I'm going on tangents now. No. One thing that I remember that Tony said specifically was we were in his class one day, and we were talking about film acting, and we were talking about how, film acting is different because you have to be a little bit smaller. And he stopped us dead in our tracks and he said, no, if you can imagine Tony just stopping us, right? And he says, no, it's not smaller. And then he asked us, he said, have you ever seen Meryl Streep give a small performance? So then we thought about it and we said, you're right, no. And so what he said was, it's not about being smaller. It's that it's a laser focus. Yeah.
So it's the same amount of energy. It just has to be, pushed through a different sort of mechanism.
Yeah. And then I think another thing that I learned, at least being on set for this, with the speed at which we were moving, was the fact that it's like it's things that you already know, but they're brought up to your attention once again, and you're reminded of these things that I learned, freshman year and sophomore and junior and senior year. But just existing in that in that environment is enough. Existing in that like I said, in that world, thinking the thoughts of the character, I think really makes a difference, because then you're in that headspace. So you're ready to do a scene over and over and over again.
Right. how did you how did you feel about, I mean, I'm sure you were excited this was your first really super big,
Yeah.
event, but how did you feel once it was all over about the full experience of film? Not necessarily this experience, because it
Okay.
sounds, everything you've talked about sounds like it was just delightful, but what is the thing about that your takeaway from film or camera present entertainment that,
Yeah.
I mean,
I
does
mean,
it attract you? Is it something that you'd still like to do?
absolutely. I think I definitely want to continue to do more. Um, yeah, I think my headspace again, like I said, was a little bit different in this, but I liked the idea of not that this doesn't, not that you don't do this in theater, but the idea of just existing as this person, you know. I mean, that's what you do in theater. The answer is yes. I definitely want to
Well,
do more.
but I think, we're always trying to develop this idea of character. And though, we often talk about subtext, it's really, can we convince the audience, right, in
Mhm.
a physical manner, in a space that's larger than any space that we should, where in film and TV, you have to convince the character with you,
Yeah,
whether it is a gesture or a small glance, but we see inside the eyes in a very different way.
I think that's what I like the most about it, about the fact that, I mean, yeah, yeah, obviously in theater, I think you just guided me in the right direction. So thank you.
Okay.
Going back to old days. Um, in theater, you're living the life of that character, but at the same time, you have to remember that possibly a good 200, 500 feet back in the back row, there's someone that also has to believe your performance. While
Yes.
on film, there's a camera that if your eye, if you if you twitch, it will be seen. Um, and so there's this almost, to me, you almost like settle, I don't know if settle is the right word, but like settle into a character
Hmm.
in film. While on stage it's a little bit of a different feeling, but like you said, like a gesture on stage, for example, it's going to have to be noticed. Like you can't just blink your eye and expect that the back row saw that, and that is a physical choice. You
Right.
can't expect that, so there has to be something else. But I like the fact that in film you can just you again just kind of settle into that role, you settle into that life, into the life of that character. There's something really really enticing to me about that, and yeah, I definitely want to continue to explore that.
Good. And did you watch the whole thing? Could you watch yourself doing it, or was it hard?
I watched the whole thing, but it was I couldn't have I barely had an opinion of it because I was just so overwhelmed by the entire experience. Netflix actually sent it to me a month before it even aired on Netflix. Before the launch date. So I had seen it back in late September, early October, and it was so overwhelming because I said, "Wow, it's so exciting to be part of a project that is going to exist like this, and that I dreamed of this as a kid. It was really exciting. So to be connected with that project was really exciting. But in terms of watching my performance, I know it was by no means perfect. It's my first experience, and I'm just kind of getting my toes wet with it. So I'm excited to keep moving forward with it, but yeah, overwhelming is the only word that comes to
Yeah.
mind. Yeah, and I knew that my mom. I mean, oh man, I
How
I
many
just
times has she watched it?
she watched it when it launched, and I came
Right.
home, and she was like, "I want to see it right at midnight," and so I said, "Okay, fine, let's do it." So we stayed up till midnight, and it turns out that it was midnight Pacific time.
3 o'clock.
So we were like, "Oh no!" We stayed up
Three
till
o'clock.
midnight, and she had to work the next day. So then we just postponed it to the following night. We
Couldn't
watched
have
the
brought your DVDs for her?
Oh no, it wasn't DVDs. They gave
No,
it.
no,
They
no, but
sent
what
it.
I'm saying is you should have brought your DVDs and then been like, okay, we'll watch it now.
I know, I know.
That's
No,
okay.
the only thing that when Netflix had sent it to me earlier, they had this giant watermark on it that
Yeah.
said my name. It said Theo Guevara, property of Netflix, not to be distributed. So it's like it kind of distorted the image a little bit.
Sure, sure.
So I wanted her to see it, the way
Yeah,
it's supposed to be seen.
yeah.
So We watched it, and she was just so happy for me, and
Of
it's
course.
really nice. My brothers actually are the ones who have seen it more than anyone. They've watched it again, and I mean, I appreciate it, but I refuse to watch it again. I can only I don't want to watch it again. I'll get too critical of everything, so I just want to let it exist.
Right. Right. Well,
Yeah,
and that's the thing is we don't really, I mean, unless it's videotaped, we don't really experience our performances and the
yeah.
things we do in
Thank
theater.
goodness.
Right. Well, but there is something about the only experience that you have is kind of that the retrieval of it, whether it's,
Mm,
a film or television or such. And in, the old days, you'd only have one opportunity to watch it, right? And now it
yeah.
can be called up for years now. Anybody can watch it. Was she
Yeah.
so proud though when she saw trending #1, Dash and Lily up in the corner and
I mean, that's the other thing. That was mind blowing. I mean, not only do we put it on I mean, the fact that it was going to be on Netflix was one thing, but then to have it be in the top 10, I think it might still be there. At least up until yesterday, it was still there, and that is nuts, David. I mean, I can't even what like what is happening, you know? And granted, it is a holiday themed show, so it makes sense that people are getting into the holiday spirit. But still, that's just something that I would not have imagined.
yeah.
Yeah.
So one of the things, because we are running out of time, because that's what I love about this series is it just feels like I'm talking to friends, which I am, which is great. But there are a couple questions that I know that are really important to you, and one of them, we did talk a little bit about representation, and we talked about like the the community of BIPOC people and how we can start to open up the walls,
Mhm.
open up the production, and I use that not just in theater but in film and such, to be more inclusive and to be more representational of what we see in life.
Mhm.
But just as, that Black Lives Matter sort of world was bringing this up to a head, then all of a sudden everything shuts down because of COVID.
Mhm.
We start spending more time inside and asking ourselves questions without a chance to sort of act on it, right? Like
Yeah.
even when we were looking at these theaters who had to create, sort of a plan moving forward, most of them didn't even know when or how or if they could move forward. But
Yeah.
in your perfect world, because we can dream all that we want to right now, how does representation, how does yeah, I guess just representation and story change as we move forward? How do you envision that world that is going to be waiting for us at the end of all this stuff?
Yeah. I mean, I think that the solution is going to be to get BIPOC creatives in the rooms.
Hmm.
I honestly think that's the solution. But then I guess the question becomes, how do you get BIPOC creatives? I think for two very prominent experiences we've already talked about in the Heights, that was, I mean, the essence of representation matters. And also the Dash and Lily, I thought was a really, really good representation of a really, really cool world. The protagonist, the family was why are the words escaping me right now? It was a mixed race American Japanese family. They had the older brother had a gay Latino boyfriend, and then the other protagonist's best friend was black, and there was a transgender woman in it. Never even mentioned it, but
I
that's
know.
perfect. And that's what I loved about Dash and Lily, was the fact that all of the representation that you saw in that show simply existed. There was no explanation. They didn't need an explanation. And the other important thing is that there's no past trauma for those people as well.
Yeah.
There, in terms of gay stories, it's very often that you see that there's a past trauma that happens within the story, and then it's a coming of age story or something of the sort. But in this one, we just eliminated all of that. We said we don't need the trauma. We just want to see the beauty of what a beautiful world can look like, where there's just a lot of representation.
Yeah.
And that's the goal. But then again, in Dash and Lily, all of the directors white, producers white. So it's we're moving ahead. But I think that the real fix, I guess, would be to get BIPOC creatives in the rooms. But I think that now seeing BIPOC people on stage, seeing them on screen, is going to influence young children now. For example, the kids that went to go see that in the Heights, and they're going to say, wow, so my people can be on stage. Let me write something.
Yeah.
And there you go. That's the door. That's
inspiration.
the needed. The inspiration, exactly.
Right.
So I'm hoping that with us putting the work in that we're putting in now, there's still a lot of work to be done. But with the steps that we're taking now, I think we will start to see changes. I really hope we do.
Yeah, and I think one of the things I'm certainly hoping is, because so many people can't produce right now,
Mm-hmm.
that new stories are going to have been created at this time, because and maybe I'm of another world. I don't like a Zoom play. I'm not really into it right now. I've tried. One of the things that was so exciting, we're doing these radio plays, and it's using the medium for the best purpose, but when we started talking about Zoom, it was like, ooh. But I'm hoping that there's just going to be this dearth of new writers and new people who are able to step forward. And also, I think it's something specifically about earlier generations who don't question that, who don't question, what is their ethnicity? Who are they? We just sort of accept that. And especially in Dash and Lily, you saw Lily for a while and you understood that perhaps, she was not white per se, but then it unfolded a little bit and we started to see a little bit more, which then opens it up to, this is just normal. And the normalization of everything that was in that is fantastic. I notice even more so, talking about mixed families. I've noticed it in commercials lately. That is really exciting, where almost no family is just this white family anymore. It's really interesting. And I think I don't want to say subversive, but it's just like, we're doing this thing and it's 30 seconds on the screen, but it changes the game.
It really does. It really, really does.
Yeah. And Target, for a while, they had an ad that was, I want to say it was an African-American family, and they had an Asian daughter. And it was just, it
is what it is.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And that process is so important. And I think your generation and the earlier generations will look at it exactly that way, and it is in some ways, the fight against the old white men. And that's okay.
Did you steal that from Tony?
I'm right there. No, I'm talking about me. I'm right here.
He said that all the time.
No, but and hopefully many of them, all of them will listen and work with the voices that are needing to be represented, So, so we have about 10 minutes left. So I did want to make sure that if anybody had any questions to ask Diego, is here's your chance before he's a big star. And never, he's like, you are not.
You are who?
You are.
I'm kidding, obviously. Oh my God, no, that's where I got to learn the craft of it, And I remember I was talking about how when I was in high school, I was doing everything to avoid going to college. I was like, how do I find an agent so that I can avoid going to college?
Yeah.
And thank goodness that I did not find that agent, that I ended up going to college, because it just, there's no better teacher for an actor than experiencing life.
Sure.
So I'm so glad that I ended up going to school.
Well, and certainly the one thing about school is it gives you opportunities to experiment in things that you might not get to do in the real world. I mean, and
Yeah.
I just was thinking about like Avenue Q right off the top of my head. You had to become, no, seriously, you had to
Yeah.
become a master puppeteer in like 6 weeks.
Mhm.
And you have something, a skill,
Not
certainly.
gonna lie, I put that on my resume, puppeting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really do.
But there's very rarely opportunities to do that outside of those sort of situations, um, or you get to play your first gay role in college, I believe, but it was Legally Blonde, right? Wasn't that the first?
Yes,
Yeah,
yes, it was.
because you were like gay for like 10 minutes in the play, but
Yeah.
um, but there, that's the thing is there are opportunities and experiences, and I mean ultimately even think about something like Columbinus, which is rarely produced, but was an opportunity that was so unique. Um,
Yeah.
and I mean, honestly, probably you wouldn't have been cast in if it was, a movie because you look nothing. You were Dylan, am I correct?
No, I was Eric.
Eric,
Yeah.
because you don't look like Eric, but
Right.
that's there's something wonderful about that too, that it is the thing that it is. So Mary Mullane has a question. Oh, and Catherine has a question too. What is the best lesson URI theater taught you?
Oh man, putting me on the spot.
How about
Um,
I'll let you think on that one because she has a follow-up. If you could reprise or redo one role that you played at URI, which one would it be?
aha! Okay. I might have an answer. I was actually thinking about this today. It's a toss up, but if I had to choose one, I think I would go for oh, I would go for Eric Harris. I would go for Eric
Okay.
Harris just because I think I've had more life experience now, and I feel that there are things that I've learned that I can now apply to a
Yeah.
performance. So I think I would have liked to give that one a second go. I have to say, but my second option would have been Avenue Q. I think
Yeah.
it was just so much fun, and it's so ridiculous. It's so absurd, and I mean, but that's why we do it, right? It's
Right.
fun.
Right.
So, yeah, for
Um,
sure.
we're gonna come back to that first question. You got to kind of keep that in the back of your brain. But
Yeah.
Catherine had a couple quick questions.
Yeah.
Did you knew the end of the story before you started filming Dash and Lily? Yes.
Yes.
Okay. And did you read the whole script, or was it handed out to you in sort of segments? Because I'm sure you read the book, but was the script all part and parcel for you?
So the script itself, we had a big table read with all of the Netflix folks,
Okay.
and that was before we even started. That was before we even had costume fittings. Was that big read, and we read through the entire series. Um, and so yeah, so we everybody knew what the story was from the beginning all the way to the end.
Okay.
But then once we got on set, they were consistently doing rewrites. So then we would get emails, the night before the night before a scene, with rewrites for that scene. That the Jonas Brothers cameo that happens I'm hoping I mean, if you didn't see it, cover your ears. Spoilers. But the Jonas Brothers cameo that happens in the final episode, that was rewritten 3 days before it was shot. They just said, you know what? I mean, we have Nick as an executive producer. Let's just get him on. So they rewrote that. They were not included in the show at all. But then 3 days before, we got a rewrite, and then 3 days later, we had the Jonas Brothers on set. So there were those instances where things were rewritten. But in terms of the whole arc of the story, we
Yeah.
knew what it was from day one.
Right. So there were no major like character changes, or they were like, he's not. Well, I don't want to give away the ending, but uh, there weren't any major swipe arounds that you showed up one day and you're like, oh, I'm
No, at least not plot points. No.
right. Okay. So we're gonna go back to Mary's first question, which was,
Okay.
what do you think was the best lesson URI theater taught you?
I think it was to love what I do. And the reason I say that was because I don't know if you remember this, David, but sophomore year, I said to myself, I said, I think I have to become a chemistry major. and I went to, do you remember this?
I
And
don't.
I, I went and I changed my major to be a chemistry major because I said, you know, this is such a scary career that I need to make sure that I have a backup plan. And so I changed my major. I went to chemistry class for 3 days. I still remember her name. I'm not going to throw her under the bus though, but she was kind of scary, that chemistry teacher. After those 3 days, I said, nope, not for me. And I've just absolutely, and the entire, those 3 days, I just felt that you know, theater was still hugging, it was pulling at my heartstrings and it was saying, come back, come back.
Yeah.
So I went back. I think that's the, honestly, weirdly enough, I think the biggest lesson that I learned in URI theater was outside of URI theater was
Yeah.
that I love what I'm doing. And if you love what you're doing, I think you're doing the right thing, you know?
And I think that's
Yeah.
one of the things that people miss a little bit in college is you have the opportunities to try that, to
Mhm.
move out of that space, to help you realize that's what you want to do, that that's your
Yeah.
dream. I mean, I did exactly the same thing when I was, I mean, I went to be a biomedical engineer. Um, but I kept doing that kind of thing, and I would go to, you know, oh, I'm gonna go be a business major, and I'd start that class, and then I'd go to acting class right after that and be like, okay, I'm gonna be back. That's okay, right? And they're
Yeah.
like, yep, yep. And every semester it was kind of something like that, but I needed that to define, oh, I need to be in the arts.
Exactly. It's like, I forget how that saying goes, but you don't, without darkness, there is no light. Something like that. Did I make that up? But you know, yeah, those moments have really helped define kind of what I ended up doing with my life. So yeah, absolutely.
So plug away. What is coming up?
Oh man.
I know that there's a lot of stuff that probably was in the works and couldn't happen, but maybe there's some stuff that we could look forward to coming up soon.
I mean, the pandemic has really, really taken a toll on everything. So um, coming up, I'm working on myself, and
Excellent.
but I do have a really, really tiny cameo coming up on that TV show Younger
Uh-huh.
with Hilary Duff and Sutton Foster. It's really, really quick. It's a one-liner, but I'll be there, so look out for it. It's the it's the first episode of season 7, I think it is, their final season. So I'll be there. You can look out for that. But as for anything coming up, nothing at the moment, but that's, you know what, that's okay. Experiencing life. Like I said, best tool, best teacher for an actor is
Yeah.
life. Yeah.
And what are you doing to self-care? Do you have like your guilty pleasure or anything that really just helps center you and keeps you kind of grounded during these crazy, crazy times?
Oh man, I mean, I guess Netflix has been one for me. I've been watching a lot of television. I mean, since the beginning of the pandemic, I have completely gone from beginning to end with Avatar: The Last Airbender, Schitt's Creek, um, that miniseries Hollywood,
Oh yeah.
How to Get Away with Murder. I watched from beginning to end. There's just so much, and I've been watching a lot of TV, but also I've been reading a little bit, just trying, reading, and also a lot of music. Um, yeah,
Good.
yeah, and going outside a lot, because now that I live in New York, it's different. But right now I'm in Rhode Island with my family, and
In an
it's so.
undisclosed location. Undisclosed location. No, you have fans now. They're probably message boards that
Stop it, David.
we need to be careful of. But you're in Rhode Island. It's
Yeah. Oh man, yes, I'm in Rhode Island, and the fact that I feel nature is more accessible in Rhode Island really makes a difference. I'm someone who grew up with nature, and being able to go outside and just walk 5 minutes east and be in the woods, and 5 minutes west and be at the beach. So
yeah.
Rhode Island is really nice to me because it's just I really enjoy nature, and I think I thrive in nature. So that has definitely been my center.
Oh, excellent. Well, it's 8 o'clock. Diego, thank you so much. This was just
Oh,
like
thank you.
the dream. I always feel like every time I see you, we neither one of us has the time, and this was like a cup of coffee and sitting and chatting.
Yeah.
But please don't be a stranger. And I use this term haltingly because it sounds so gross, but we are just so happy for you and so proud of the work that you're doing. And I hope you are too. And I know your mother is. And um, how could she not be? And all the best wishes to you, you know.
Thank you so, so much.
Yeah, of
Thank
course.
you.
Thank you. And
And thank you, everyone.
yes. And thank you everybody for coming. We will hopefully get this up on the next couple days, the audio of it, as well as Ahmed's interview too. So thank you all for coming, and we will talk to you all soon. And Diego,
Thank you
well,
so much. And for everyone who sent messages, I don't know what they say because I'm doing it on the phone right now, but thank you, everyone.
thank you, Diego.
Thank you, David. Bye, everyone.
Thanks. You're the best.
No, thank you.